My name's Alexandър Dou. I'm the regional director for Stephen George International. I think probably, there's quite a lot I think that people don't really understand about architects and their profession. I think predominantly it's the way architects think in their day-to-day lives. I think I've used this example before, but one of the things I think that stands out is the fact that architects want to improve the environment around them. They look at the environment they live and they want to make it better. There's a sort of natural draw to do that. That's a tricky one. It depends what we're working on at any given time. If we're working on a house, that tends to be the subjects within our minds at that period of time. So, we'll be very much focused about that small scale, of design. If we're designing master plans and city plans, we're thinking on a slightly different level, and we dream about that. I think for me personally, I enjoy master planning very much, and the experience of getting different functions to work together, in the best possible way to create environments which hopefully make people's lives a bit better. I'd say that's what predominantly takes up my mind in terms of when I'm thinking about design. What is my superpower?
Yes.
I'm good with people, and I enjoy working with people. I think there's two sides to what we do. There's the fact that we have an incredible resource in and the knowledge and experience that we have with our partners in the UK. And there's also the fact that we've built up a team here locally that has drawn continually on that experience by working in projects in the UK, and how to best make use of the skills that we've developed over the past 8 years, whether that's actually going out and trying to service large projects internationally, or whether that's actually to work locally, or whether it's actually to work in a cost-effective way abroad. So trying to find our place sometimes is a bit of a challenge in terms of where do we want to be in 5 years. That's still something which is fluctuating. It's a very competitive market locally. So, and architecture is challenging generally. So, I think if you're talking about the local market, if anything, it's our capacity to draw on the way we deliver. I'd say architecture isn't just about design, it's about how you deliver the product. And I'd say that's where we have a lot of experience, and maybe where we have a bit of an edge. If you're talking about internationally, if you're an international client, or you're a fund, and you require certain companies to have certain certification and certain levels of experience, we're obviously able to cater for that. We have high PI levels. And outside Bulgaria, because we bring a significant amount of expertise to the table, and we can deliver it in a very cost-effective way because of our office here, which is staffed locally. It tends to be, to start with passion for what they're doing. That's key. And an ability to work within a team, to be able to leave the ego at the door, and to be able to recognise other people's ideas and value them as much as your own. And that's something that we try and, when young architects come into the office, the first 2 years is a lot of that training is actually spent trying to let them understand that, get them to understand that. Being a good person, that's key. I think when we interview or when we recruit, we tend to recruit the person, not necessarily the skill base, with the view that we can train the skill base, we can't train the person. house, is very personal. You're doing something for someone who's going to live in it. So the space, you're designing at a different level. You're taking a brief, which is a very personal brief, and hopefully taking that person on a journey through to something that they get, something which is above and beyond their expectations. A master plan is a bit more, let's say, there's always a client, but there's more, generally it's more architectural, it's more what you present and your ideas, and, they're generally what follow through, so. I mean, that is a question I get asked a lot, and I have a sort of default answer really, because I didn't really choose it. I came here with my fiancée at the time. We bought a house, as a lot of British people did, and I just, to cut quite a long story short, I was working with a Spanish architect called Eduardo Rifa on a project in central Bulgaria, a large one, and we met here, and that's what kept me here, or kept me here for a prolonged period. I think it was about 3 years ago that I actually decided that I was going to stay here. So up until that point, there was always the sense that I was going to go back to the UK, actually. I think 3 years ago, when we had our first child, was really the point where I said, okay, all right, I'm here, and this is what I'm going to do. So, I mean, we hope that cities are going to be driven by technology. And some cities will work quicker towards that than others. What will slow the pace down is the ability to be able to fund and deliver infrastructure for modern technologies. But obviously, the electric vehicle and the evolution of the self-driving car are going to be huge factors in terms of the way cities develop. At the moment, when we design office buildings, we have huge criteria for parking, as an example. When we're designing now, what we're trying to do is future-proof those spaces that we're designing, and the theory that in 15 years, 20 years' time, they could be redundant. So, when you're building these huge underground concrete structures, which could be redundant in that time, you have to try and think about how they can be used further on. And that will also impact road infrastructure, the scale of road infrastructure that's required, hopefully creating more pedestrianised access, which again is a big problem where cities have been designed around the motor car. Well, a lot of what we're designing now is driven by code. All we can do is try and future-proof what we call future-proofing what we do. So we do think about it, but there's only so much we can do. So it doesn't affect what we do now very much. Clients generally appreciate it when you do think along those lines, though, because most of the time they haven't thought about it themselves. So being able to say, have you thought about, bringing your car parking above ground and creating the spaces, the car parking spaces an extra metre high so that they could be converted to commercial space later on, should there be a requirement. Those are ideas that, can actually change the dynamics of a business plan for a client drastically. And that's essentially what they employ you to do. The other parts are obviously on the sustainability side, which are becoming more and more standard as architecture develops. There's always innovation there. The question is do you have the time, and are the clients prepared to invest up front in spending that time to develop innovative ideas for their buildings? Usually we're working on very, very tight deadlines, and the clients are working on very tight deadlines, so that's deemed as a luxury. But we try and do it as much as possible. We go to a client with a list of potential queries about how they're going to resource their energy, how what's the building going to what's going to happen, what's the life cycle of the building, what's going to happen when the building dies, what can the facade be recycled, is the space flexible, can it have a secondary purpose. Sometimes clients pick up on these things, sometimes they don't. Well, firstly, 40% of carbon emissions come from buildings. So if we have any intention of trying to reduce global warming, architecture and construction has to pay attention to these issues. To try and reduce our carbon footprint is number one. And how do we do that? We do that through energy efficiency. the types of materials we use, where they're sourced from, the embedded carbon footprint of materials themselves. In countries where you have earthquake zones and low budgets, you're slightly limited in what you can achieve, to be honest. You still have generally to use a concrete frame, which is, has a high, by definition, has a high carbon footprint. But the reason why we do it is because it has to go that way. I mean, if the industry doesn't tackle, like every other industry, we don't really know what's going to happen. But in the past 10 years, there's been huge strides across the whole industry in this direction, and it's actually becoming easier for us as architects to do a sustainable building, because the suppliers know what they're doing. Because clients, they don't want to have high electricity bills. They want efficient systems. I think it's probably at one of Atanas Panov's buildings, which is on Chernivra, which is an office building. It's the SOT 161 building. It's a very nice building. I think, his architecture is usually very well designed, and that's probably my favourite because it's simple. It's classy in terms of its execution. There's a couple of Juro Kotov's houses from IO Architects. Some of his work is outstanding actually. So.